This pristine BMW M3 has exactly 40,000 miles on it, and right now it's sitting on the back of a tow truck, a $70,000 paperweight broken down on the side of a California highway. 4,000 miles away, in the rain-soaked streets of Frankfurt, a different BMW is still working, a beat-up, beige 5 Series running as a taxi. The odometer reads over 500,000 kilometers. It has been driven hard every single day for over a decade, through winters, through highway hauls, through drivers who never once babied it. And the original engine still runs perfectly. 2 identical badges, 2 completely different fates. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why. For 20 years, the internet has told you that owning an out-of-warranty BMW is an act of financial masochism. Bring my wallet, a guaranteed way to drain your bank account one repair bill at a time. It's one of the most repeated jokes in car culture. So repeated, in fact, that most people who say it have never actually owned one. But is it true, or is it a story that stopped matching the car a long time ago? Today, we're setting the forum rumors aside. We're going into the actual engine blocks, the hard maintenance data, and the specific mechanical failures that built this reputation, engine by engine, myth by myth, to find out what's really behind the Bavarian Paradox. Are modern BMWs fragile money pits? Or have you just been lied to by people repeating a joke they never verified? Stick around. The answer is more useful than either side of the argument wants you to believe. Act 1. The reputation. To understand the paradox, we first need the pedigree. For decades, BMW built its entire identity around a single slogan, the ultimate driving machine. And for a long time, the engineering actually backed up the poetry. In the 1980s and 90s, cars like the E33 series and the E39 5 series were revered. Not for gadgets, not for luxury, but for brilliant chassis dynamics and robust, over-engineered inline-6 engines that could rack up 300,000 miles without drama. These were drivers' cars built by engineers who were obsessed with mechanical feel and long-term durability in equal measure. But as the 21st century dawned, everything changed. Cars were suddenly required to be safer, heavier, faster, and infinitely more connected. Emissions regulators demanded cleaner combustion. Buyers demanded more horsepower without more fuel burned. And to hold on to its performance edge while carrying all that new weight and new regulation, BMW's engineering grew incredibly complex. Layers of sophisticated electronics, complicated emission systems, and tightly packaged engine management systems that left almost no room for error. With that leap in technology came a leap in the cost of ownership, and the acronyms followed almost immediately. Bring my wallet, break my window, big money wasted. It became accepted wisdom, repeated at dealerships, in YouTube comment sections, at every backyard barbecue where someone mentioned buying a used 3 Series, that owning a German luxury car out of warranty was an act of financial negligence. But here's the question nobody bothers to actually answer before repeating the joke. How much of that reputation is based on real systemic engineering failure, and how much of it is just the inherited mythology of car culture passed down long after the specific problem was fixed? That's what we're actually going to find out. To separate myth from fact, we have to silence the forum chatter and look at the numbers: maintenance costs, dependability rankings, repair frequency. The average annual repair cost for a BMW hovers around $968. The industry average across all brands is roughly $652. BMW owners visit the shop for unscheduled repairs about 0.9 times a year, against an industry average of 0.4. Read those two numbers together, and the internet's stereotype looks completely justified. Case closed, right? Not quite. Here's where the data gets genuinely tricky. If you look at recent J.D. Power studies, at both the initial quality study and the long-term vehicle dependability study, BMW's position has been surprisingly inconsistent from year to year. Some years it lands almost exactly at the industry average. Other years it climbs well above it. What's undeniable, though, is the trend line. Across multiple 2026 studies, BMW has been closing the gap on, and in some cases outright beating, Audi and Mercedes-Benz, the two brands it's most often lumped in with when people talk about unreliable German luxury. So how does a brand carry a reputation for punishing repair costs while simultaneously trending upward in measured dependability? The answer isn't a contradiction, it's a distinction most people never make. The difference between how often something breaks and how much it costs when it finally does. A failing water pump on a mainstream economy car might run you $300 in 2 hours in a driveway with basic tools. That same job on a modern, tightly packaged BMW engine bay might mean $1,200 specialized diagnostic software that costs more than the part itself and a full day of skilled labor just to get the intake manifold out of the way. The car didn't fail more often than its rivals. But when it did fail, it hit the wallet 3 times as hard. It's the size of the bill, not the number of visits, that leaves the lasting scar on an owner's memory. And scars, unlike statistics, are what actually get repeated online. There's a second factor buried in those numbers too, the warranty cliff. New BMWs are covered for 4 years or 50,000 miles, and almost every catastrophic failure story you've ever heard happened right after that window closed. Not because the car got less reliable at year 5, but because that's exactly when the person paying the bill stopped being BMW. When people call German engineering fragile, they're overlooking a basic law of physics. Performance has a price, and BMW has always chosen to pay it in complexity rather than in speed. Every engineering decision here prioritizes driving dynamics and power delivery above almost everything else, including sometimes long-term forgiveness. 4 philosophies explain most of what you're about to hear: tighter tolerances, turbocharging, direct injection, and aggressive weight saving in the cooling system. First, tighter tolerances. BMW machines its internals to incredibly precise specifications: pistons, cylinder walls, bearing clearances measured in fractions of a hair's width. That precision is exactly what lets these engines rev freely, breathe efficiently, and run smoother than almost anything else on the road. But tighter tolerances mean less room for error in either direction. Miss a single oil change. Use the wrong viscosity in the depths of winter. Let the oil level run low for even a few thousand miles. On a loosely tolerant economy engine, that kind of neglect gets forgiven. On a BMW, it compounds fast and quietly until it doesn't. An engine built like a Swiss watch simply cannot be treated like a tractor. Second, turbocharging. To hit modern power targets from smaller engines, BMW forces more air into a smaller space under enormous pressure. It's brilliant for power and efficiency, but it also concentrates more heat and stress into fewer, smaller components, leaving less mechanical margin built into the design. Third, direct injection. To meet tightening emission standards while still adding horsepower, BMW shoots fuel directly into the combustion chamber at extremely high pressure rather than mixing it in earlier the way older engines did. It's remarkably efficient, but because fuel no longer washes over the back of the intake valves on its way in, oil vapor from the crankcase bakes onto those valves instead. Over tens of thousands of miles, that turns into serious carbon buildup, choking off airflow and eventually requiring an expensive walnut blasting procedure just to clean the valves by hand. Finally, cooling. This is, without question, the most notorious part of BMW ownership, and for good reason. To hit a perfect 50-50 front-to-rear weight distribution, the foundation of BMW's entire handling philosophy, engineers shed weight wherever they possibly could, especially up front near the engine. Their solution was extensive use of hard composite plastics in the cooling system, the water pump housing, the thermostat, the expansion tank, dozens of small connector fittings. In a lab, Under controlled conditions, this plastic is genuinely strong, but a real engine bay is a hostile, punishing environment. Hundreds of thousands of thermal cycles, heating up past 220 degrees Fahrenheit, then cooling back down to ambient over and over for years, eventually turn that high-tech plastic brittle. It cracks, it bursts, and suddenly, your ultimate driving machine is sitting on the shoulder of the highway with steam pouring out of the hood. Every stereotype has a concrete origin story. For BMW, public opinion wasn't shaped by their everyday successes. It was permanently, disproportionately damaged by a handful of specific engineering villains, engines that failed loudly, publicly, and often enough to define a decade of reputation. Meet the N54. Introduced in 2006, this was BMW's grand return to turbocharging after years away from it. A 3.0-liter twin-turbo inline-six that produced massive, intoxicating power for its size. Tuners loved it instantly. It was one of the easiest engines in the world to push well past factory output, but it came bundled with fatal flaws. The high-pressure fuel pumps failed at genuinely staggering rates, sometimes stranding drivers in the middle of fast-moving traffic with zero warning. The turbocharger suffered from severe wastegate rattle, an infamous metallic clatter that made a $40,000 sedan sound like a bag of loose bolts at idle. It was a brilliant engine to drive. It was a terrifying engine to own once the warranty ran out. If the N54 was merely problematic, the original N63 Vive 8 was a genuine catastrophe. BMW engineers made a radical decision here. Instead of mounting the exhaust manifolds and turbochargers outside the engine block the conventional way, they placed them inside the V of the block itself, a so-called hot V design. From a performance and packaging standpoint, it was genius. Shorter exhaust paths, less turbo lag, a tighter engine bay. From a thermal management standpoint, it was an oven with a badge on it. The extreme concentrated heat baked the engine from the inside out, destroying rubber hoses, warping plastic coolant lines, and most notoriously, cooking the valve stem seals until they hardened and lost their seal entirely. Once that happened, the engine began drinking oil the way it should have been drinking fuel, some N63s burning through a quart every 1,000 miles or less. The engine's own electronics even ran the cooling fans long after shutdown just to survive the heat, which led to chronic battery drain on cars that had barely been driven. Then there's the N20, BMW's turbocharged 4-cylinder, which suffered from timing chain guides made of plastic on a component responsible for keeping the entire valve train in sync. Those guides could shatter with age and heat, sending debris through the engine and destroying it from the inside, sometimes with almost no warning symptoms beforehand. Put the N54, the N63, and the N20 together. HPFP failures, hot V heat damage, and shattering timing components, and you have the perfect storm that built the modern narrative of BMW unreliability almost single-handedly. These engines didn't just cost their owners money, they eroded trust at scale. They created an entire generation of scorned buyers who told everyone they knew and vowed, loudly and permanently, never to come back. But engineering, unlike reputation, is a science of iteration. BMW knew it had a genuine crisis of faith on its hands, and it knew it couldn't survive being seen as a brand that built disposable leases instead of cars. So the company went back to Munich, quietly scrapped its old engine blueprints, and rebuilt its architecture from the ground up. What emerged was the modular B engine family, and it sparked one of the quietest, most thorough reliability comebacks in modern automotive history. The star of that comeback is the B58 inline-six. BMW abandoned the open-deck block designs of the N54 and N55 era entirely, moving to a closed-deck design that massively increased the structural rigidity of the block itself, reducing the flexing and micro-movement that had contributed to earlier failures. They also drastically thickened the timing chain and, critically, moved it to the rear of the engine, solving, directly and permanently, the exact failure mode that had made the N20 infamous. The B58 was so thoroughly over-engineered that when Toyota, the single most trusted name in automotive reliability on the planet, went looking for an engine to power its revived flagship Supra, it didn't build its own turbocharged 6 from scratch. It chose the BMW B58. Toyota's own engineers tore the engine down to its base components, tested it against their own famously punishing internal standards, and concluded independently that it was bulletproof enough to wear a Toyota badge. Paired with these new engines was the widespread adoption of the ZF8 HP 8-speed automatic transmission, widely considered, without much argument, the gold standard of modern automatic gearboxes. Lightning-fast shifts, buttery smooth in traffic, and essentially indestructible as long as it receives basic fluid services on schedule, something BMW themselves used to claim, incorrectly, was lifetime fluid. The result of the B48, the B58, and the ZF8 HP working together is measurable. Newer BMWs have quietly, steadily climbed their way back toward the top of independent reliability charts, model award by model award. They didn't rebuild their reputation with a marketing campaign. They rebuilt it by literally engineering the old flaws out of existence, one closed deck block at a time. So if modern BMWs are objectively, measurably more reliable than the ones that built the joke, why does the internet still scream otherwise? Why is the comment section under every single BMW video still full of tow truck jokes and bring my wallet one-liners? The answer isn't mechanical, it's psychological, specifically confirmation bias and negativity bias working together at internet scale. A car forum is, structurally, a hospital for broken cars. Nobody drives to work without incident and logs on just to type, "My car started perfectly today and nothing went wrong." That post doesn't exist. People seek these platforms out when they're already in pain, already frustrated. So the math becomes brutally simple. One blown engine gets posted across 5 forums, 3 Facebook groups, and a Reddit thread shared thousands of times. 5 years of quiet reliability gets posted nowhere ever. One catastrophic failure generates 1,000 data points online. 5 years of nothing generates 0. That's not a fair sample of reality. It's a megaphone pointed permanently at the worst case. This creates a self-reinforcing distortion of public perception. The traumatizing repair bills from the N54s and the oil-burning N63s of a decade and a half ago are still living rent-free in the collective memory of car culture, echoing across new videos and new comment sections long after the factory actually solved the underlying problem. The reputation never aged out with the parts that earned it. Which brings us back to our taxi in Frankfurt. How does a car like that exist in the same world as the horror stories we've just spent the last several minutes cataloging? The truth is, high-mileage BMW fleet vehicles are remarkably common across Europe. Many of them running robust diesel engines like the B47, engines built specifically with fleet-level durability in mind. But the real secret to their longevity isn't just the fuel they burn, it's the culture of the people who own and maintain them. In Germany, vehicle maintenance isn't treated as a polite suggestion buried in an owner's manual. It's treated functionally as law. Backed up by the TÜV, Germany's brutally rigorous mandatory inspection process, which can and will pull an unsafe or poorly maintained vehicle off the road entirely. Under that kind of regulatory pressure, European taxi and fleet operators don't wait for a part to fail before they replace it. That approach would be financially reckless at their scale. Instead, they run on strict, calendar-driven preventative maintenance. Fluids are flushed on schedule, not when they look dirty. Belts are replaced before they show the first sign of fraying. Cooling system components, the exact plastic parts we talked about earlier, the ones that make BMW forums light up with complaints, are proactively swapped out at specific mileage intervals, whether or not they've actually failed yet. It is maintenance as insurance, not maintenance as reaction. They understand institutionally exactly what they're operating, a high-performance machine with very little margin for neglect. Given clean oil, fresh fluids, and consistent care, it's capable of staggering long-term durability, 500,000 kilometers in the case of our taxi. The taxi test doesn't prove BMWs are secretly bulletproof. It proves the machine isn't inherently flawed. It's highly sensitive to neglect, and it punishes that neglect far more severely than a forgiving economy car ever would. We return to the question we opened with. Which car represents the true BMW? The invincible workhorse grinding through 500,000 kilometers of Frankfurt rain? Or the broken sports car sitting silent on the back of a tow truck? The honest answer is that they both do, at the exact same time. The Bavarian Paradox was never a mystery waiting to be solved. It's a mirror, reflecting the owner back at themselves. A BMW is not a Honda Civic, and it was never engineered to behave like one. It will not forgive 3 skipped oil changes, or a decade of deferred cooling system maintenance, or a bargain bin purchase with 0 service history and the hope that it'll cost pennies to run. Treat it that way, and it will break your heart and empty your wallet exactly the way the internet warned you it would. But understand what you're actually buying. A highly complex, precisely engineered driving machine built with almost no margin for neglect. And give it the strict, proactive maintenance it was designed around, and it will reward you with a driving experience that very few other manufacturers on the planet can match for hundreds of thousands of miles. The reputation for unreliability was earned during a real, well-documented stretch of flawed engine designs. The N54, the N63, the N20, engines whose failures were loud, expensive, and legitimate to be angry about. But the comeback built in response to that anger is just as real, and far quieter than the criticism ever was. Today's BMWs, built around the B-Series engines and the ZF8 HP, are stronger and measurably more durable than the internet's 10-year-old joke would have you believe. In the end, reliability was never just about the metal, the plastic, and the software that rolls off the factory line. It depends on engineering. That part is true, and BMW has clearly done the work. But it depends equally on maintenance, and it depends just as much as anything else on walking in with realistic expectations about what you're actually agreeing to own.